Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. Quantity or quality? Movements, particularly those carried out by oppressed peoples, have to grapple with that question. But more importantly, they also have to make peace with the answer. Because, believe it or not, who you have in your circle is far more important than how many people you have in your circle. Yes, there is strength in numbers, but that's only true if your numbers are dedicated to the mission. An army of millions means absolutely nothing if there are a bunch of slackers and a bunch of chicken heads and a bunch of dusty dudes and worthless people just sitting around wanting to be entertained. Now, what does this have to do with us? Everyone has a part to play in black empowerment. The enemy is a lot of things, but one thing the enemy is not is overly emotional when it comes to their fellow white supremacist. They don't have to agree on every little thing, nor do they have to be intimately involved in whatever particular activity it is they're up to in Charlottesville or D.C. or wherever. The enemy has dedicated themselves to the preservation of white supremacy and the permanent subjugation and eventual elimination of black people. And that's enough to keep all of them on code. We have to be very careful about who we allow into our circle. I'm very circumspect about who it is that I mention, whose name that I use, who I choose to signal boost. There's a reason why it takes years for me to give someone a mention in one of my videos. Some of you have contacted me and wondered why, after a few days or a few months, I haven't mentioned you. It's a matter of, well, I've been asking you for a few days, few months or whatever, and you haven't mentioned my name. You haven't signal boosted my channel or my Twitter feed or reposted my messages. When people do stuff like that and they try to get me to say their name or to mention what it is that they're doing, that's agent behavior. That's suspect behavior. You got to have a track record, and it can't be just a couple of months long. When I see people who are trying to get me to mention them or what have you, that's somebody who's trying to get themselves some instant legitimacy, get themselves some clicks and some views. And that's an easy way for you to be ignored by me, or if it's persistent enough, to get blocked. Black empowerment is not for clout chasers, but wherever there's people who are speaking to the masses or who have gathered any sort of following, there's always more than a few people standing around who desperately wish that that could be them, because to them it's about attention. Oh, they'll try to tag along in the hopes that this will boost their own profile and importance, because that's what they showed up for. Some people come to places like this to do the work, and others come because they want someone to acknowledge they exist. Now, I've been doing this for 15 years in this YouTube space alone, more outside of that. And in over a decade and a half, I have never shown my face, and if I met you offline, you didn't even know it was me. In all that time, you haven't seen me beefing with anyone or trying to make myself into some sort of hotshot. It's about the message, not about me. Now, there's nothing wrong with going on camera or having your face out there or your name. That's not the problem. The problem is we got a whole bunch of little undercover agents who haven't been putting in the work, people who are popping up trying to figure out how do I get you to say my name, and these clowns clearly suffer from ego starvation. Their goal isn't black empowerment, it's validation. That's what they want, from as many people as possible. To them, this is as good an arena as any to get some quickie attention. 15 and 20 years ago, black discourse was relegated to the toilet. People talking about spiritual mumbo-jumbo, trying to hustle some drawers that way, talking chakras and other nonsense, trying to sweet-talk some females into the bedroom with metaphysical gibberish. Back then, this black empowerment talk wasn't popular at all. I remember because I was there. But as white supremacy's gone on the march, black people haven't had the luxury of listening to clowns waste their time. They want people who will address the real and violent threats that they face now. They want intelligent conversation on the issues. They want people who are going to give them forewarning and forearming. Black people lost their patience for the pseudo-spiritual gibberish and the kumbaya Dr. King had a dream folk. Black folks in the last several years have started getting serious. And who else has gotten serious happens to be the agents, the hangers-on, and the clout chasers. Now, when it comes to being an advocate for black people, that's not going to make you rich. I don't have a private jet or my own island, and I never will. The sad truth is, most of our advocates died poor, or were just killed outright. There's no riches in sticking up for the poorest, most powerless people in this society. You can become well-known, but most of the time that makes you a well-known target. As a people, we have historically done a poor job of supporting our advocates and an even worse job of protecting them. If there's one thing we should have learned from the 1960s, it's that you cannot just hitch your wagon to Malcolm or Dr. King's star. We tried to make them into the workhorses pulling us along to liberation, and too many people figured all they had to do was cheer on the champions and things would work out, but that's not how things went. The enemy within takes many forms. The bootlick and the self-serving shysters are easy to spot, but there's others, many of whom aren't even directly in white power's employ, but nonetheless they work against our interest all the same, sowing the seeds of dissension. Now, there seems to be a familiar pattern that plays itself out every year around this time. Summer, usually late summer, is when people's social media feeds start getting shut down. A lot of you know about how my channel came under attack in June. This is racial warfare, the harassing and harrying of one's enemies. These disruption campaigns against the new voices of black media occur year-round, but they seem to become particularly active in the summer, especially late summer. Like a lot of you, I've noticed that in recent weeks, there's been some random people who you've never heard from at any other time who have tried to start infighting amongst our groups and get people arguing amongst ourselves. In the past, these disruptors would be totally random clowns, their YouTube channels or their Twitter accounts created in the last few days or the last couple of months, so they were easy to spot. Their YouTube channels had no activity whatsoever. They weren't subscribed to anyone or had anything. And when you check out their Twitter feeds, you see all this off-code nonsense, though some of the slicksters would try to make private who could actually see what they posted. We put out the word and these chumps easily got called out. So now we're seeing a different type of agent. Individuals who don't start trying to disrupt what we're doing until after they first establish their own meager minor presence. You know the type. They'll do just enough to make a few social media posts to get some people to retweet them. That's why they're always saying, retweet me, retweet me. This way, when they inevitably begin trying to get people to fight each other, they can point and say, oh, look at me, I've been putting in some work, look what I've done. They can point to the one or two posts that they've done or something like that. To them, this is their camouflage, but in truth, it doesn't fool us. The problem is when people like myself talk about checking out people's paperwork, we mean a hell of a lot more than whether your account is more than a few months old or whether you've made a couple of posts that happen to appear to be on code up until now. Paperwork has to go back a lot farther than that. People who are serious about this, they understand why this is the standard. Our enemies certainly understand why it's the standard. But clout chasers and agents, they don't like that standard at all because it weeds them out. Now, to be sure, no two people will move in the exact same way, but we better all be moving in the exact same direction is what I'm saying. For those of us who have been out here for a minute, there's a reason we do what we do and a reason why we do the things the way that we do them. Bucket-mouth bootlicks who make it a point to start attacking people, especially the new voices of black media, you need to ask why this is happening and why it's happening now. Nothing happens in a vacuum under white supremacy. That includes these agents of disruption. People who are busy doing the work don't have time or interest to disrupt. But people who are trying to undermine us, they'll do just enough to try to con some of the gullible or those with weak minds into thinking that they're genuinely about black empowerment, and then they start spewing the nonsense. Our job is to keep the bar high enough that these agents simply cannot get over it. Good day. And be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Vincent Ali, Ginger Vine, Ikegas Dorset, Turk McKenzie, and Andrew Murphy. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.